regimen. Our exercise is typically organized, and of course the best way to do that is simply to reduce your circulating sugar concentration to the lowest extent practicable, and you avoid or reduce your assimilation of exogenous advanced glycation in products which are created upon cooking and are extant in various foods, whether cooked or not. You can increase lifespan through this avenue of glycation restriction. And this is one of those interventions that are included in the so-called detractors of anti-aging interventions, that is, glycation diminution. And this points to the fundamental importance of cyclic fasting as an avenue of lifespan prolongation, because it is cyclic fasting that most potently suppresses the concentration of circulating sugar. The lower the concentration of circulating sugar in your body, the less sugar you have to attack your body's tissues and to render them dysfunctional, if you will.
Where would you say you get your energy from if your glucose levels are kind of low?
That's an interesting question. Most individuals have an appreciable amount of energy stored in adipose. And this points to another element of the detractors of anti-aging interventions, and it's that if animals are rendered lean through either surgical extirpation of adipose tissue, targeted genetic interventions which decrease adiposity, that increases lifespan independently. So in a convoluted way, what I'm saying is that when you don't consume exogenous sugar, you make use of that stored adipose, and that extirpation of adipose independently promotes longevity.
Right, obviously you can get energy out of fat, but you don't have a lot of fat on you, so where do you get your energy from?
I like your question, because that points to the third avenue, which is autophagy. When you deplete your glycogen largely from your liver and your skeletal muscle, and again, the morning aerobic exercise stimulates that, and you have a low content of adipose tissue, your body makes use of stored proteins. It catabolizes all of your body's proteinaceous tissues and recycles them as substrates for energy, and that autophagic induction of energy metabolism, if you will, contributes to lifespan prolongation by renewing proteins more rapidly. Under sustained caloric restriction or cyclic fasting, skeletal muscle is preferentially preserved, and there are more labile proteins that are catabolized before protein and before brain tissue. So these are selectively preserved.
So, okay, let's talk about your diet. So you eat a lot of nuts and, was it roots, starches, things like that?
Yes, grains.
Grains. And you eat all this within an hour?
Yes, or less, yes. We have our tripartite meal, if you will. And by tripartite, I mean that the first thing we consume when we break our 23-plus hour fast is what I call the amino elixir, consisting of 3 protein sources: soy, spirulina, brewer's yeast, and ideally a dozen isolated amino acids. And the next thing we consume is the main meal, one of those staples of which I mentioned earlier. These typically include beans and rice. Typically we have one of 3 beans. Cannellini beans is my favorite, the red kidney beans. And when I say bean, this is the common bean, Phaseolus vulgaris. And there are many different cultivars. But one of the main reasons that we select the bean as an optimal staple, if you will, is because there are many properties associated with the common bean that accord with lifespan extension. And these include inhibiting the enzyme alpha-glucosidase, which promotes optimal glycemia, if you will.
Beans are full of fiber, which really helps the sugar levels in your body.
Indeed.
It helps get rid of toxins. Beans is great.
Indeed.
It's probably one of the best cooked foods you can have. If you're going to go with cooked foods, it's great. Okay, go on, sorry.
No. Yes, roots, tubers, rice, grain, and nuts and seeds. Fruit and fresh vegetation is not high on our list of staples, and that's simply because the cellulose and the water content take up space, if you will. So if you have a regimen where you're restricting your feeding to an hour or less, and you consume foods that occupy a large volume, have a higher water content, indigestible fiber, over time that can reduce your sense of satiation. So you want to have nutritionally dense foods in order to essentially derive the most nutrients in a minimal amount of time.
Right, you want nutrient-dense food.
And then there is the minor meal. And the minor meal is nothing more than a dessert. Typically nuts, dried fruit, often what you might call peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, or peanut butter and nesubat sandwiches, which roughly means royal jelly. That's one of the staples of our minor meal. And I say peanut butter and jelly with some reluctance, because it differs a bit from what you might find in a typical grocery store. It's simply crudely crushed peanuts and fruit preserves on bread. That's a typical dessert. A typical dessert may also be roasted peanuts with dark chocolate.
I'm glad you said peanut butter. I love peanut butter, and everybody says peanuts are bad. It's got the toxins in it.
Aflatoxin.
Aflatoxin, yeah.
That is why roasted peanuts are actually preferential in our ethos, if you will, because if you consume raw peanuts or germinated or soaked peanuts, it promotes that growth of fungal organisms and aflatoxins. But just to give an indication of the scientific basis, there is an entire tractate with several sections that discuss multifarious epidemiological and interventional studies which find a relationship between longevity and nut consumption, and peanuts are particularly prominent in those studies. That is, it's been found that consumption of peanuts accords with lifespan. The particular variety is simply crushed, crunchy peanuts with little added salt, no other ingredients.
It's funny because all peanut butters out there, they have palm oil, sugar, and all that.
That's why I'm sometimes reluctant to call it peanut butter, because of the confusion. That is essentially the Amen meal, the tripartite Amen meal. Throughout the 23-hour fast, we typically consume teas and herbal infusions of various sorts. These include green tea, black tea, oolong tea, but also two of the South African teas, honeybush and red tea or rooibos, hibiscus, one of my favorites, rhubarb tea, and any number of herbal infusions, most of which have been found to influence one of these several physiological factors that we know are operative in the aging process. And those again include autophagy optimization, glycation inhibition, fat oxidation, diminution of inflammation, etc.
So when you say nutraceuticals, that sounds like something from the pharmaceutical industry. You're talking about herbs and natural things.
That's quite correct. There's several of these. One is niacin-bound chromium. Another is glucosamine. Another is curcumin or turmeric. another is resveratrol, and combined with cyclic or intermittent fasting, the polyphenols that you find in green tea, in blueberries, and in pomegranates. So when we speak of nutraceuticals, we're talking about these agents, and physiologically, all of these nutraceuticals have been found to modulate one of several molecular mechanisms. And again, we have our familiar glycation, autophagy induction, immune enhancement, and lipid oxidation or minimization.
And you take these throughout the day and mixed in with your teas and water and stuff?
Yes. The teas that we consume, when they are sweetened, they're sweetened with non-calorific sweeteners such as stevia, which is essentially the sole sweetener that I use during my fasting period.
Is that your stomach? Yeah. Sorry.
Not at all. It's a good sign.
It's like a growling bear. No, this is actually a good comparison here. You haven't eaten in a while, and your stomach's growling. He hasn't eaten since yesterday, and he's doing fine. Yeah, well, that's the point.
Excellent.
That's the point.
And actually, that effect is partly attributable to a peptide called ghrelin, and it is released by the gastrointestinal tract in response to food deprivation. It actually increases the expression of a peptide called BDNF, brain-derived nerve growth factor, which increases the proliferation of neurons in the brain, specifically in the hippocampus, an area that's associated with learning and memory. And that is probably among the reasons that fasting and caloric restriction increase mental or cognitive acuity.
So this might explain people in India. They're mainly vegetarians, and they don't eat a lot, but yet they have some of the smartest people in the world. They can literally calculate to the 100th decimal point. And these people that say you need meat, you need animal products, you need fat, you need sugar, you need all that stuff to function properly, you got it dialed into a point where you're proving you don't need any animal products.
Correct. I'm somewhat conventional in that I promote the ingestion, the use of essential multi-mineral, multivitamin supplementation. And whenever someone subsists on a calorically restricted diet, either quantitatively restricted or temporally restricted, it's important to ensure that you get the minimal requisite amount of essential nutrients.
Right.
And that's what I get from a standard vegetal micronutrient, mineral supplement. I take that in powdered form in the almond amino elixir, and it's the first thing that we consume on an empty stomach. And that's designed essentially to be sufficient as a source of energy and nutrients without the need for any food at all. So the elixir is intended to deliver all essential nutrients in a form that is easy to assimilate, and the meals are simply for satiety and indulgence, because I think that's an important point to stress. If you're going to have a lifelong regimen that is predicated upon lifespan prolongation, it has to be sufficiently palatable in order to be sustained over a lifetime. And indulgence, gratification, is an important element of enjoying life. And we do find that our diet is very palatable, very enjoyable, even with the perceived monotony. We love dinner. Feeding time is always festive. It's always a feast, if you will. And what the research indicates is that both cyclic fasting and caloric restriction greatly increase energetic efficiency, such that organisms can make do with less. All of their physiological systems become more efficient, and they're able to effectuate their physiological operations with far less energy. And that reduced energetic demand actually results in a lessened generation of those deleterious byproducts of metabolism, free radicals, for instance, advanced glycation in products. So with a reduction in metabolism, you get a concomitant reduction in waste products and other deleterious agents that damage the body.
So the less waste products that your body has to deal with, the more cleaner it is, more efficient it is.
Indeed.
Being clean is almost more important than massive amounts of fuel just being guzzled down.
Indeed. Another effect that has been observed widely on caloric restriction, cyclic fasting, and other interventions that increase lifespan is a decreased detoxification capacity, and more specifically an augmented expression of so-called phase 2 enzymes or xenobiotic enzymes. And these are enzymes that are specifically expressed in the liver, also kidney and other tissues, that essentially convert toxins in such a way that enables them to be expurgated from the body more efficiently. So this is thought to be a major factor in the lengthening of lifespan associated with fasting and caloric restriction.
So the organs that help eliminate toxins from the body, the liver, the kidneys, if they're cleaner, they can focus more on producing enzymes and keeping you running optimally rather than just cleaning the house and getting rid of unwanted garbage.
Indeed. And also, as we discussed together, we are exposed to multifarious toxins that we can do little as individuals to avoid in our modern environment. So to the extent to which we can augment our detoxification capacity, we can protect ourselves from some of these toxins that would otherwise be ubiquitous, and we simply can't avoid.
Right. The toxins in the air, the water, even the negative people, it just drains us of our life force.
Indeed.
So the cleaner we are mentally, physically, and emotionally, the better we can thrive as long-living, healthy beings.
Indeed. But I must interject an element of my philosophy, and that is I wholly accept the inevitability of aging. I wholly accept the inevitability of death, and my regimen is simply predicated upon postponing that process to the greatest extent
And
practical.
having a high quality of life.
Indeed, which is
Most people in the
uppermost.
last 40 years, they're just falling apart,
Yes,
complaining about the other people that...
indeed.
Yeah.
And it's important to have sufficient energy, mentally and physically, in order to arrive at the psychological, philosophical, existential state that you wish to attain before that ultimate end.
Right. You have a website you want them, I mean, if they say, I want to know more, I want to buy this book, where do I go?
You can go to our website, AmintaEliteAthlete.com, and it has a description of my overall regimen, the literature that I've produced, and how to acquire it. I don't sell my materials. I release them with a donation to individuals who are earnestly interested, and I stress that because our regimen is ascetic and it's clearly not for everyone, so I'm interested in individuals who are serious.
Right, because a lot of people can say, just give me something to take so I can get bigger muscles or live longer or not get sick, right? There is no quick answer. This has to be a lifestyle, a way of living and being.
An all-encompassing lifelong protocol.
Right. So, folks, a lot of this is not for most of you who want a quick fix for something. This is a dedication to a life, a way of living.
Well said.
Yeah, well, thank you for your time, and you're quite an inspiration, and hopefully we'll check in again in a while. And any last words of advice for people who are living in a modern world that are kind of like ready to throw their arms in the air and say, I give up, I don't know what to do?
Subjecting yourself to self-imposed discipline is the surest way to increase the quality of your existence, period.